Being too nice isn't making people respect you, it's quietly making them ignore you. And the worst part, you probably think you're doing everything right. You avoid conflict, you try to be understanding, you put others first. But instead of gaining respect, something else is happening. People start seeing you differently, less decisive, less valuable. And it doesn't happen slowly, it happens in subtle moments you don't even notice. So if you feel overlooked, underestimated, or taken for granted, this is exactly why. Here's the illusion most people never question. Being nice does not equal being respected. In fact, the more you try to be liked, the more you slowly give away your authority. You start saying yes when you want to say no. You soften your opinions to avoid tension. You explain yourself more than necessary, hoping people will understand you better. But instead of clarity, what they feel is hesitation. And hesitation changes everything. Because respect isn't built on how agreeable you are, it's built on how certain you appear. The moment people sense that you're adjusting yourself to keep them comfortable, they stop seeing you as someone who leads and start seeing you as someone who follows. You think you're creating connection, but you're actually lowering your perceived value. Not because you're wrong, but because your behavior signals that being accepted matters more than being respected. To really understand why this happens, you need to look beneath the surface. Respect is not something people consciously decide to give you, it's something they feel based on subtle signals. And one of the strongest signals in any interaction is certainty. Not loudness, not dominance, but quiet, grounded certainty. When someone is truly confident, they don't feel the need to constantly explain themselves or seek approval. They state their point and they stop. That pause creates a sense of control. It signals they're not dependent on how others react. But when you're too nice, something different happens. You start adding layers, extra explanations, extra justifications, extra reassurance. And even if your intention is to be kind, the signal that comes across is hesitation. It no longer feels like confidence, it feels like compensation. And people pick up on that instantly, even if they can't explain why. Because when you overextend yourself to keep others comfortable, you subtly communicate that their perception of you matters more than your own position. The interaction stops being about mutual respect and becomes about approval. The person who seeks approval always holds less power. Think about real situations. In a meeting, the person who speaks clearly and briefly then sits back, often carries the most influence. Meanwhile, the one who keeps talking, adjusting, explaining from different angles, slowly loses authority. The more they speak, the less weight their words carry. The same pattern shows up in relationships. The more you try to avoid conflict to make sure everyone feels good around you, the more you invite people to overlook you, not intentionally, but instinctively. Respect isn't built on comfort, it's built on presence, and presence comes from being grounded in your own decisions, even if they create tension. They think being nice will protect them from rejection, but in reality, it often leads to something worse, being invisible. Now, here's where this becomes dangerous, because most people don't even realize when they're doing it. These behaviors feel normal, even right. First, you say yes when you actually want to say no, and every time you do that, you teach people that your boundaries are flexible, or worse, that they don't exist. Second, you soften your opinions the moment you feel resistance. You start adding phrases like maybe, I think, or it's just my opinion. But instead of sounding thoughtful, you sound uncertain, and uncertainty weakens your presence instantly. Third, you over-explain your decisions. No one asked, but you still justify yourself. What you don't see is that every extra word reduces the weight of what you're saying. It shifts your communication from clarity to persuasion, and persuasion, when it's not needed, signals doubt. Then there's the most subtle and most damaging habit, your inability to sit with silence. The moment there's a pause, you rush to fill it. But that silence was never your enemy. It was your advantage. It gave your words space to land. It created tension, presence, weight, and every time you remove it, you remove your authority with it. All of these behaviors come from the same place, the need to be accepted, to avoid rejection. But the irony is brutal. The more you try to control how people feel about you, the less control you actually have, because now you're reacting, adjusting, overcompensating, and people feel that shift immediately, not logically, but instinctively. They start to place you lower in the dynamic, not because you lack value, but because your behavior signals that you're unsure of it yourself. And in any environment, uncertainty is almost always interpreted as weakness. That's how respect starts to disappear, without a single word being said.
Now here's where everything begins to change. The moment you become aware of this pattern, you gain something most people never develop: control over how you're perceived. And the shift doesn't come from saying more, it comes from needing less. Less approval, less validation, less reassurance. Instead of trying to be understood all the time, you start focusing on being clear. You make a decision and you stand by it. No extra layers, no unnecessary explanations. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. You'll feel the urge to add more, to soften your words, to make sure the other person agrees with you. But that urge is exactly what has been weakening your presence all along. So instead, you do something different. You speak, and then you stop. You let your words exist without rushing to support them. You allow silence to fill the space. And that silence, which once felt awkward, starts to become your strength. When someone questions you, you respond, but you don't defend. You answer briefly, directly, and then you let it sit. That moment carries more weight than any explanation ever could, because it signals something rare: certainty without effort. You also start setting boundaries without over-justifying them. You say no when you mean no, not aggressively, but clearly. And you don't rush to explain why, because the more you explain your boundaries, the more negotiable they become. And the moment people see your boundaries as negotiable, they stop respecting them. But when your words are simple, direct, and consistent, something shifts. People begin to adjust to you. They stop testing you. They stop looking for ways to push past your limits. And over time, this creates a completely different presence. You become someone who doesn't need to chase approval, doesn't need to manage every perception, doesn't need to overcompensate. You feel more grounded, more stable, more in control, not because you're trying to dominate, but because you're no longer trying to be accepted at any cost. And that's where real power begins. Quiet, subtle, but undeniable. The kind of power that doesn't demand respect because it naturally commands it. At the end of the day, being too nice doesn't make you respected. It makes you predictable. And the moment you become predictable, people stop valuing your presence. Respect was never about how much you give, how much you agree, or how comfortable you make others feel. It's about how firmly you stand in who you are, especially when it's not convenient. The more you try to be liked by everyone, the more you slowly lose yourself in the process. You adjust, you filter, you hold back, until there's nothing solid left for people to respect. So the next time you feel that impulse to say yes when you mean no, to explain more than necessary, to soften your position, pause. Don't react immediately. Let that moment exist. Because in that pause, you have a choice. You can either fall back into the pattern that's been costing you your power, or you can respond differently, with clarity, with restraint, with certainty. Because the people who are truly respected don't chase approval. They don't try to be everything to everyone. They decide who they are, and they stand by it, even if it creates tension, even if it's misunderstood. And that's the shift. Quiet, but powerful. The moment you stop trying to be liked is the moment people start taking you seriously. And once that happens, everything changes.